This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created Zapbox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink. I'm here with Rony for This Week in XR. It's July 19th, 2024. Good morning, Rony.
Good morning, everyone.
We're without Ted this morning, a rare thing indeed. But we will soldier on with our guest, Sarah Nagy, with Seek AI. They use generative AI not to draw pictures or write news stories, but rather to manage and interpret companies' data. So she will come on in a little while. This is interesting because we don't talk about it very much. We always gravitate to the sexier and more visible parts of the industry. So you'd think we would have a slow news week, and in some ways it was because we didn't have any $250 million Series A rounds or companies buying others for hundreds of millions of dollars in stock. Instead, this week we have a couple of old-fashioned startups that are getting by with less than $20 million to do things with AI. The first is a company coming out of Stealth with $16 million to bring generative AI to gaming. And we know one extremely well-funded company, I think valued over $1 billion, in World, that our friend John Gata is an advisor to. And we have had, I believe, them on the show last year. So it's obviously a huge opportunity in a huge category.
No, it's look, Charlie, I think what's going to happen is over the next decade, you'll just see there was an enormous amount of capital put in, but the casualty rate, I think, is going to be really high of companies that they almost got there. Because I think what's happening is to get there versus almost get there is the tipping point difference in a lot of these AI companies. Like being really good, but not all the way there. If you think about like voice AI, when it was almost good, people were just like not going to use it. And then like Alexa was a tipping point, right? It was finally crossed the line of good enough. And then it was usable. But like some of these things are like really flash in a demo. But when you actually come to practical use, you're like, no, this isn't any good.
Well,
I
we'll
think there's
see.
a lot of Gen AI like that. That's like almost good.
Integrating it into games is a long process because, as you know, it can
Yes.
take 5 to 10 years to make a AAA console game, which
Yes.
is the first place it's likely to be implemented just because of the scale and the budget. But the idea of sentiency inside of games has been contemplated by many, many books over the decades. And you can see, in fact, it's featured in the movie Her. He plays a video game with a sentient character that reacts to the player. And you can have a relationship with those NPCs, those characters inside of the world. In fact, you may not be able to tell, at least at first, whether you're dealing with a player avatar or a non-player character. So I think the potential of it is really exciting, and I think it could be the next big thing in games, honestly.
I would say that the generative part is a piece of what it takes to build software to build a game, right? I think one of the things is you really break down like what do you have to do. There's someone who comes up with a production timeline and a budget. There's cost accounting. There's actually tuning each element of the game and game loop down really refined. There's analysis. There's testing. There's debugging. So if you think about the amount
No,
of
it's
work,
like making a giant animated movie. There are hundreds of people
yes.
and hundreds of specialties in all sorts of verticals that you don't know exist until you actually try to execute something on that level.
Right, and I think the maybe 100,000 foot misunderstanding is that generative AI solves all those problems. Generative AI is useful in a part of it, but I would say like 80% plus is not generative AI suitable. It's other kinds of computing, other kinds of computing intelligence. So it'd be interesting to see like the promises some companies might be making. Maybe they deliver, maybe they figure out how to go all the way there. But it's also possible that some of them have overpromised what generative AI as it is today can do as the sort of end all be all versus just being one of maybe hundreds or dozens of different things you have to assemble to actually build a game, build an application, build something.
So, jumping from AI over to our favorite topic, spatial computing, 3D, and there's a company called Jigspace. Do you know about Jigspace? So they take a CAD
It's
and they instantly convert it into a 3D model that you can look at on any device. So it's an Australian company. They reeled in 13 million, and our friends. Oh, and they're bundled. Sorry, here's the big hook for Jigspace. And the reason anybody knows about them is because they're bundled with the Vision Pro.
yeah, Jigspace is cool.
Yeah, so good for
I think
Jig.
it's one of those apps that like is it the thing that you're going to use all the time, or is it the app that shows you some of the promise of enterprise potential of something like XR Vision Pro or others? It's like, yes, why aren't we using this in CAD on a more ongoing basis for design reviews? By the way, there's a lot of companies that do that, have done it, but I think what Jigspace is doing well is it's making present on the Vision Pro, which is cool.
Agreed. So Haiper, which is a text to video generating AI tool that's on the web, competes with Runway and so forth. They just introduced an image generator, video generator that can go up to 8 seconds, which is Runway, just did a 5 second one. And they're expensive. They give you a sense of how much Sora is going to cost if and when it's actually available to consumers. But a lot is happening in this area right now. Hyper raised for almost $14 million earlier this year. They already have 1.5 million users, and this category is active, rapidly changing, and has some well-funded competitors, including Runway and Pika, which have both raised over $100 million of Runway. I think is valued at well over $1 billion now. And you've also got Open AI, Sora, and China's Kling. So there are an awful lot of players piling in that can't. And I haven't named Genmo and others in the category. Moon Valley, are not heard from that much. So a lot of noise here. Not going to be a lot of survivors, I don't think.
No, I was gonna about to say, Charlie, here's a prediction. We can come back in 5 or 10 years ago. That was idiotic, but I think if you're Apple and you got Final Cut or you're Adobe, they're looking at this and going, all right, casual video, right? This isn't pro level yet, it's casual. There's going to be a point, maybe it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where it's now crosses the line where an Apple says that's good enough, and they have something like Final Cut GarageBand video, where they take I think at the more pro amateur level, they take everything that we're seeing and now make it like, wow, that was good. Or an Adobe does that around the same time. So I think these guys are watching and letting all kinds of people fail, and VCs pump billions of dollars into these things. I think the end game is once they show that they're almost there. My guess is the Adobes and Apples know the same magic trick,
Right.
because I'm not sure there's a magic trick these guys have. They're filling videos into probably almost the same foundational models and getting similar results, unless they somehow have some massive funding and completely do a restructure of what's going on. I just think these guys are watching, 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 letting them be the sacrificial lambs. And then, I, again, I think this is an area where coming in late
Well,
actually pays off
and of course those guys can just show up and buy the winner.
or kill the winner. Right, like the moment Apple
Well,
drops
yeah,
like Final Cut
right,
Casual,
right,
it's
right, right,
over, right? It's
right,
just built into your
right,
iPhone and your Mac, and it's
right.
over. And why would you pay? You know, what I mean, they'll just cut the leg. They're
So
just
just
using these other companies to team grab and to prove.
that's a
And I
good
think that
point.
is the playbook
That
right
is a
now.
good point. And one thing I would add to that, because we haven't talked about this on the show, but I think it's going to be the huge thing with the drop of Apple AI in the fall is what it can do for photos. I think people are gonna their minds are going to be completely blown. And once it's in your photos, you can it's totally malleable. So
Yes,
once Apple layers those things onto it, I predict photos are going to become really addictive.
and they already are, right? Like they're and like the I mean, so that will lead
Oh no,
to
no. Now it takes Rony. Now it takes a modicum of skill to upgrade the photos and take care of extreme problems like out of focus.
yeah.
Whereas
Now it'll be like boom,
supposedly, yeah,
yeah.
correct. It's going to say, "Oh, you took an out of focus picture, Rony. Let me fix that for you."
Or hey, Ted was missing. Let's add Ted, or all kinds of.
Right. So, here's the last topic before we bring in Sarah. I'm sure you've seen this news item, an AI documentary about Brian Eno, which really makes sense when you think about it. And apparently, he would not allow the documentary to be made without a twist like this.
I mean, look, he's clearly always been cutting edge. He's kind of on the awesome side. Like, why not, right? Why wouldn't he be in one of those early wrappers of this thing? Makes a ton of sense.
So each viewing of the film is crafted through bespoke software um, to select from 30 hours of interviews and to put it in a different order. Supposedly, they say there's 52 quintillion possible versions. I don't know. Here's my question about this. Right now, it's only in 3 theaters, which makes sense if you're doing it in public. But even if you were doing it to the home directly, how would that work? You'd have to do it, I would think, on its own streaming platform, right? You couldn't do it on like Netflix. It would have to be its own thing.
Yeah, unless Netflix created a weird AI streaming. But here's the question: other than like the Brian Eno experimental novelty, he puts the flag, he did it. I think about going to a restaurant. We have a great chef. Do I want 80 million variations of the food, or do I want one that this is great? Someone curated and edited and filtered it. I'm wondering, does AI create an even higher need for those editors, for those chefs, for the
Mm,
tastemakers? Because we're just going to be filled with seas of complete garbage,
I,
randomly assembled garbage that grows like gray goo at some trillion rate. And I think the people who really have taste, who can filter out the very best, the truffles from the junk, they're going to be ever more valuable right now because I think all we're doing is spewing massive amounts of
well,
junk.
but you have to be a curator. Right.
Yes.
So for example, I'm telling tales out of school. We're not supposed to use AI in our work on Forbes, and they have told us that repeatedly. And obviously, there are a broad range of concerns that they have, but it writes a great first draft. If I have an interview with you and I have a press release and I add a few top level insights and tell it what I want, right? Because it's best when you know exactly what you want as the output, right? You almost have to know the answer in order to pose the question. But then it turns out a first draft, which is okay, not good enough. But then you start revising it, you ask it to redo certain parts of it. And before you know it, there is a story written 50% faster. And of course, there isn't a word in there that I don't touch. So the story really is written by me, but you could also argue it was kind of curated by me.
Yeah, you were author editor.
Correct. So I,
Right, it's like you have a junior intern. You're like, uh,
yes,
or you're like Picasso. You're like, give me the first pass. You know, like some of those artists that just had minions making. They didn't really. They just
yes.
came in and signed their name. That's what AI is doing for a lot of people. You're like the signatory, the supervisor, but it's basically you've got minions. Professors do this all the time, by the way. There's like a
Yep.
whole bunch of post grads schlepping away at like a buck an hour or whatever, and they're writing most of the paper. Professor comes in, looks at it, edits, smiles, puts their name, they get first author.
Yeah, exactly. So
Here we go.
anyway, Sarah's coming in. Sarah is, I believe, the CEO of Seek AI. Hello, Sarah.
Hey, good morning, Charlie, Ronnie.
Good
Good
to see
morning.
you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Unfortunately, we are Tedless this morning, but Rony and I have carried on.
That's an awesome background, by the way.
Thank you. It's kind of old actually, but okay.
So why don't we start out with the basics? We always jump right in, but we'll be a little more disciplined today. What is Seek AI?
So Seek is a natural language interface to help anyone in a company get better access to large data sets. I started the company because I used to be a data scientist for many years. So I started it out of my own pain point of just like constantly helping to pull data for business people.
Okay. So you when you say pull data, so is this so, for example, a marketing person could say to a database of spreadsheets, um, what hours are people 18 to 35 watching TV? And it would just give me that answer without me having to access the spreadsheets. Is that kind of a basic thing it does? Slice and dices the information and returns sort of insights.
That's exactly what it does, and that use case is actually pretty on point. We actually have a lot of marketing teams that are using Seek to get those kind of insights about consumer behavior. But sometimes the questions can get pretty complex,
I
or
was using the easiest one I could think of to kind of illustrate what an executive would do.
yeah, no, exactly though. That's a perfect type of example. But sometimes they have those kinds of questions and they can't find the spreadsheet or you have to like go into 20 different spreadsheets and merge the data together or whatever. And that's when I wasn't working with marketing teams. I come from financial services, but I would have, similar problems where business people would come to me and just be like, "Hey, Sarah, I'm having a lot of trouble getting this data that I need. Can you just get this for me?" And I was like, this is adding work to my job because this is all stuff that, I'm not even expecting that I'm going to be working on.
So where are you based, sir? I see you're in a space station, but in physical reality, where are you?
Yeah.
Sarah has for most people who are listening, of course, to audio only. Sarah has a virtual background of what looks like an open office space uh, on something that is in Earth orbit. It looks like, or orbit of some planet.
Yeah. People have told me it reminds them of the restaurant at the end of the world. um,
Douglas Adams, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I am in the Milky Way in real life. Just FYI. Our office is in Tribeca in Manhattan.
Nice.
Oh,
Well, so
very
you
cool.
mentioned financial services, and I'm very interested in how AI is affecting um, the finance industry and its predictive abilities and what people are doing in that area.
Sure. I mean, I can talk about my own background and
Great.
some of the use cases we're working on with large asset managers or data teams in other types of funds. So my own background is in a very specific niche of finance called alternative data. In case folks aren't familiar, which I would expect, it's like if you don't work in finance, it's pretty under the radar. But it's unusual data sets containing alpha. So, if you've ever opened the Wall Street Journal and read about, oh, this hedge fund is, hiring PhDs to count cars in parking lots using satellite data to predict like the price of Walmart. That I was one of those people. I had just a master's, but I was one of those people. And so the way that we're working with financial firms today is just helping the non-technical people get better access to insights from all of those different sources of data. Like when I worked in the hedge fund world, I was working with thousands of those types of data sets. And the problem right now, just with data in general, especially just structured data, large data sets that are stored in warehouses or data lakes like Snowflake or Databricks is it's really, really hard not even to just query one of those data sets, but forget about just, joining them together and, deriving very kind of proprietary insights from those kind of joined together data sets. And so historically, you've always had to hire more humans to be able to get more value out of the data. So it's kind of this linear relationship. But for the first time ever, you can change that to more of kind of an exponential relationship by investing in AI software that can then, automate all that work that, humans, oftentimes annoyed humans who, like me in my old job, used to have to do.
You see this as something that like banks, investment banks, private equity, the McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group types that they're going to, because a lot of associates like you get in, and that's what you're doing. You're sifting through mountains of data on large projects. Is this something you think becomes a staple in those kind of companies?
That's our hope. I mean, we had the chief data officer of one of the companies we work with tell me like this is something every Fortune 500 is going to need. Not just in finance, but we also work with other types of companies too. Like I mentioned marketing teams at CPG, enterprises, for example, or like e-commerce companies. Everybody has their own data troubles right now, and so yeah, that's what we're doing is solving it with AI. Yeah.
So if we're going to get a little geeky, and you don't have to describe it all what you're doing underneath the hood, but whatever you were willing to talk about, are you using large language models, your own models, something else? It'd be just interesting to see what you're willing to share on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're absolutely using large language models.
Okay.
None of this would be possible without large language models, actually. Just for some context, I actually started following large language models starting in 2018. I happened to just be sort of forced onto this project I didn't want to work on involving NLP, natural language processing. And, I didn't necessarily want to work on that project because it wasn't really my background. But as I started working on this project, I learned about these large language models and like GPT-2. And I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And I actually saw this subreddit where somebody had GPT-2 like generate the whole subreddit with all the comments and posts and stuff. And I was like, okay, it's kind of interesting, but whatever. But then by 2020, I was seeing that, these models were being used for code generation. And then I was like, whoa, okay, this could actually be really serious because I'm writing code every day to help the business people and pull data for them that that this is work that I really don't want to be doing.
So are you going to be able to automate it?
Yeah, I mean, we already automate, a significant amount of these kind of, repetitive tasks that usually data teams want to be able to automate so that they can work on just higher value types of
How,
projects.
how many people are in your company, Sarah?
So we're a little less than 20 people right now. Yeah. So we're a startup.
So when you find a customer or a customer finds you, what is the interface? Are they doing this on the web? Are you going on-prem? Help me understand how you onboard and deploy and what you're really selling. Is it software? Is it consulting? Is it both? Is it things that you built? Is it things that you're building, open source that you're building on top of? Help us understand that aspect of your business.
Yeah, so the product is a web interface. So you just, go to the app in your browser. You can just type into the interface. It's not that different than what you'd come across with like, ChatGPT or any of those types of apps. And you just type in what you want to know, or Seek can even generate
Well,
for
you have
you.
to train it, right? I have to give it access to my spreadsheets, right?
There is a training process in the beginning, yes.
And how does that happen? Do you help me, or is it automated? Is it clear what I'm doing step by step? I mean, how smart do you have to be?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the training data is what makes it all work. And it's kind of something we've honed over, the last couple years. Uh, because it's a combination of a few things. Like we can't make the customer do too much work, like you were saying. We've got to kind of meet them where they are. Some of the customers have already done a lot of processing of their data, but some of them haven't. And so, we just made a decision early on. We're just going to choose to meet customers wherever they are at that point in the process. But that did mean developing highly proprietary, types of onboarding for the messier data sets to be able to get the AI to understand, like, what does frog 123 like as a column name, what the heck does that mean, stuff like that.
Um, so how smart is it? Does it know, or do you have to tell it what every column represents?
Our approach is what we absolutely don't want to do is have the AI hallucinate anything. We're working with numbers and data. So we're a very different type of AI product, I would say, than most of the more well known ones like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Anthropic. I think what all those types of AI products are really good at is querying data from the web that's mostly unstructured. So you can have it write text or help you answer kind of text based questions about like PDFs or whatever. um, Seek is entirely focused on querying structured data, and most of that really involves numbers and calculations involving numbers. And what that means is like you can't BS numbers; like they have to be right. Um, so we take this approach where if at any point, the AI is trying to hallucinate like a metric, for example, say like to your marketing example, say there's like a few definitions for, customer or whatever. Um, Seek is not going to make any assumptions there. I like to say that AI sometimes suffers from the Dunning-Kruger effect. It can be like highly confident and highly wrong at the same time, which is extremely dangerous.
Mhm.
So we've accounted for that with just a few layers of guardrails and a proprietary workflow and things like that.
Is that a lot of like if you're building on an LLM, is a lot of the work the software to take what's coming out and like make it a lot better? So you're kind of like needing to create all your checks and balances like with what it does, or are you actually going into the LLM and tinkering with it?
We do have our own LLM, that's, proprietary, and it's better performing than, any of the other, closed source or open source models that are out there. However, I will say, I don't think LLMs are gonna be what drives innovation necessarily over the next 6 months. That's kind of a hot take, but, just from my experience, and I'm definitely, my view is definitely limited to our field of, reasoning about numbers. But from what I've seen, I think it's actually going to be more agents, multi-agent type of systems that work with LLMs, but it's more like the system of, for example, like detecting a hallucination and fixing it. That's probably what's going to drive most of the gains in accuracy over the next 6 months, I would think.
And how are you finding like just being a startup in the AI world right now, like dealing with investors and trying to grab customers, or just like in an era where some companies are like insanely overfunded. You hear about companies that like they formed 3 months ago, they have a $1.5 billion valuation, and then there's like plethora of companies that are like kind of living on scraps, fighting their way forward. Like how are you finding that?
I mean, I would say we're probably somewhat in the middle. We're not, we haven't raised a stupid amount of money. Because I come from the hedge fund world, not not a big AI shop. So, I've always been a little bit more on the scrappy side. Someone actually came out with a really interesting article, I think yesterday, about why quants are kind of undervalued in the AI world. I'm a quant. Like it's something not a lot of people know about. So,
Oh, I know about it.
Well,
nice.
actually, talk about that a little bit. Like, why? What is a quant? Why are quants undervalued? That's an interesting.
I think it's just there are very few quants in the world. It's a very strange world. Um
You have
it
to
can
be like a fucking genius, right? I
Well,
mean,
Jeff
that's like,
Bezos was a quant, right?
yeah,
He was
seriously.
a quant. Quit a quant shop and went and founded Amazon,
The people
right?
who are quants, they just like look at numbers and know what they mean. They like speak to numbers.
yeah.
Number whispers.
Okay, well, this starts to make sense. You're trying to put Sarah Nagy in a jar.
Well, yeah, no, it's like I was, that's my whole like background is like I was a quant, I came from the physics and astronomy world before that. And so it was like unbelievably frustrating and annoying to have somebody just come up to me and be like, "Sarah, data now. Like I need this market share tonight so I can make this trade," stuff like that.
Like, I'm
And
being
so
underused, undervalued.
Exactly, and when I talk with data scientists, pretty much every data scientist has this exact problem too. Because most data scientists are smart, they have a master's degree, a lot of them come from STEM, and I think a lot of them are really disappointed with what the industry is like versus the expectations.
So, what would a quant, if you were going to fully utilize a quant properly in a company or an AI company, what would they be doing versus what they are doing?
Well, my whole motivation to become a quant and then later data scientist was to find alpha. I think finding alpha in data sets is one of the most difficult things to do because you're really you're really being a contrarian. Like you're trying to find things that other people don't know about and take action on them. And like that's what alpha is. So AI, I think by definition, does the exact opposite of that. It literally just guesses the most likely next word from the web, which means it's by definition generating like the median of exactly what you would expect.
So, for our audience, some of whom might be like super quants, investing in GameStop or whatever they're doing. But for those who don't, maybe just talk about what finding alpha means.
It means finding information that when you take action on it, you can generate some sort of reward because others haven't yet discovered that information. Yeah, just for the GameStop analogy, I think it's a little different because, I think the trade from a few years ago was different than the trade from this year that I think it made Roaring Kitty a billionaire, right?
Right. Like, let me ask you this: so, if you still aren't tracking the finding alpha, if you are a musician, right? Someone playing lots of notes doesn't mean anything, but when you come up with the melody for Hey Jude, that group of notes, that's alpha. Then there's a lot of noise, like prog rock noise or just random. It seems like AI generates tons of notes, and then you have to hunt for, yesterday or Hey Jude or this. Oh, that's really cool. And not everyone has that ear for it. Is that a reasonable way of looking at it?
I think that's a really nice analogy. I really like that. I think that people are probably really good at developing these kinds of, contrarian viewpoints that you really want to pursue. At least to me, that's a lot of fun. Or, you want to be kind of an individual and, have your own contribution that you're making. And I think AI is a great way to just help you accelerate that.
I'm going to ask you a contrarian question. Charlie, you're going to love this. If you get seek to find alpha, are you just going to disappear? Because if you got it to do that, why would you give that to anyone else? Just go open up your own hedge fund and disappear and buy an island.
I know. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Yeah.
Right. Like I would say, like I would argue you haven't. Yeah, Seek doesn't find alpha yet because I think by definition you would not be here. Like I think the moment you get Seek to find alpha, Seek is like a private company. You open up your own, I don't know, institutional private equity or something like that. But I do think that day's coming where teams who are building these things are realizing, wait a minute, like if we figure that out, we're going to beat, David Tepper. We're going to like, because as good as those quants are, the day's coming, and I think you're proving this with Seek, that computing will beat all the best hedge fund managers, the best people at Fidelity. It's just that's going to drop too. Concept artists, mathematicians, like everyone is eventually going to have their humble pie day. But my guess is the ones who do it will not know. They'll just disappear. Like because if you've got it, why are you going to share that? Like that would be kind of an odd thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I kind of feel like the road you're on is ultimately an AI that's looking for alpha in the sea of data.
I think that day is coming where this will all be fully automated, but that I don't think, yeah, either that day is here and we just don't know about it, or it's just not here yet. Having worked with large language models for a long time now, um, I would probably guess it's the latter. Like it's still very early days.
I
And
think they spew a lot of junk too. I don't think LLMs find alpha. I think they ingest stuff and regurgitate things, and you're like, you just have an even larger sea of stuff to hunt for now.
Yeah, and I think if you can harness what they do well in a good way, and especially combine it into, series of sequential steps and decision making, that's where it gets really powerful. But to your point, we're not really about like we're not a hedge fund, we're not about like trying to just generate, alpha ourselves. It's more about automating um, very inefficient processes in asset managers or like enterprise CPG companies or e-commerce companies. It doesn't really matter what the company is. Like I said earlier, I think everybody needs this, but for us it's more about automation. And personally my alpha was just like discovering LLMs before everyone else, frankly.
Sarah, one more question on that. So, are you going to be more useful in a large company with tons of data, and now the people there aren't having, they use the machine, or in really small teams where they can't afford lots of data scientists and quants, and now a small team use your software, they could be the equivalent of a large team with a lot of people. Like, who do you think is adopting you more quickly?
Oh, definitely the smaller companies adopted us more quickly. That's just part of being a startup, I think. So yeah, that's how we were able to get rapid feedback pretty quickly on what was working and what wasn't. Yeah, a lot of the early companies we worked with didn't have data teams at all. So, even having Seek was just sometimes it was all they needed. But yeah, working with these larger companies, they have very sophisticated data teams. And the problem now is just more, enabling the data teams to be able to work on higher value projects for the business. And also just making the business people, like fundamental investors, marketers, uh, products, leads, whatever, making them actually more efficient at being smarter.
So what one more question. I'm sorry for going down the rabbit hole, but if you're, I forgot the guy's name, like Hello Super Kitty, the GameStop guy, and he had Seek, would Seek have helped him find his thesis more quickly? And could you have a collective, sort of these like swarming collectives share what they find to create new, almost like flash mobs of like, equity investors that have their own ideas, but instead of like one person sitting in a basement trying to find a pattern, is that person in a basement now with Seek finding patterns and gathering a following on social media? Like, do you think you accelerate things like that, or is this a completely different use case?
That yeah, I think Roaring Kitty could have used Seek.
Roaring Kitty. Sorry if he's out there listening. He's probably not, but it's not Hello Kitty or Hello Flaming Kitty.
Yeah, no, if Roy and Katie's listening, yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. They're
Want to revive Blockbuster? Sorry.
oh
So,
yeah.
Sarah, do you have any competitors, or are you completely running down the field behind everybody's back?
I would say that uh, there's one kind of industry that's actually been around for a while since the 80s. Which is business intelligence, which is a very broad ranging phrase. But what it's really come to mean is this whole kind of area of these companies that essentially have like data visualizations and charting. So, for some reason, I think business intelligence has basically become synonymous with charts and graphs, on top of existing data. Um, so, I would say, because business intelligence software also queries numerical data and seek queries numerical data, sometimes we get compared to business intelligence, or people think we're business intelligence. Um, so I would say, like, that's the overlap.
I
Could
see.
someone use Seek for drug discovery? Like, is it sector agnostic? Like one is using for investment, but could someone else sift through molecules and set it up to find other kinds of patterns?
That's our goal someday. To be honest, right now our focus has been on automating the most kind of repetitive, stuff that people don't want to do. So more like, basic data analysis type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think in the future, um, what Seek can do autonomously without human supervision will get more and more sophisticated to the point that maybe we can work with highly complex, data like that. Yeah.
So, Sarah, one final question. Um, since you are a AI insider, uh, you mentioned a couple things when we first talked, and I didn't want to end the show without bringing them up. Particularly your view on AI and search.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and it's not related necessarily to Seek, but I know you have a point of view about that that I thought would be interesting to share.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've spoken about this before. How AI would change just search engines. Um, I mean, I think that my personal experience and, talking to others just anecdotally, I think I hear the same kind of, micro level type of experience, which is, uh, I think in traditional search, you're getting results back that you personally have to sift through, and that can be very time consuming. So I think that AI has really done a great job making search much more productive by just doing all of that, kind of combing through those results for you and being able to also show you the sources. So that's something that's really nice about, we were kind of talking about structured versus unstructured data before. This is like a beautiful example of how AI can just do such a great job querying unstructured data just by like pulling up these sources for you, giving you a summary of what's going on. And if you don't believe it, like if it hallucinates, the stakes are much lower because
Right,
you've got the source and then you can just see for yourself.
right. The example I use is you want to know who won the World Series in 1946. And so if you use a search engine, it's going to give you a list of lists of who won the World Series. And you can often go to that site and there'll be a paywall, there'll be advertising, and you're several quick clicks away from what should be a simple answer. And it gives you who won the World Series in 1946. Boom, that is the answer. Right. So it's just saved me probably a minute, which is not okay. A minute's not a big deal, but it is a big deal if you do that 100 times a day.
Mhm.
So it starts to be very meaningful. And uh, one of the, I think, profound things that's happened with AI already is that we're learning how to use it the way we learned how to use search engines. right? You have to start to understand how the tool can be used throughout your day. Like, I'm standing there at the grill saying, "What's the right temperature for ground beef?"
Mhm.
Right? So, and it just gives you the answer. So I think that's kind of incredible upgrade of search in specific. And I think obviously it's going to transform Google's business dramatically because 75% of their money still comes from their Dutch auctions for search advertising.
Yeah, you're totally right, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how do you teach folks to use AI. I think search is a very accessible way to get started with AI because you already know how to use Google, so the way you use search is exactly the same way. With more complex types of workflows, I think that there's still a lot of room to kind of optimize the user experience. But search, I think, is like that's why ChatGPT became so viral because anybody could use it.
Sarah, it's been great having you on the show. This has been a great conversation. We have to wrap up our interview and our show for today, but thank you. I look forward to meeting you in the real sometime. So we can have further conversation about this fascinating topic. As I said at the top of the show, we don't generally take deep dives like this, so it's been a real pleasure to learn some more about how businesses are going to be using AI and about your company and your ambitions. So thank you. We don't often talk to quants. Which you can't find many people smarter than Rony, but we might have gotten lucky today.
And Charlie, I think a good way to close the call, if you're watching the video, Sarah's at the restaurant at the end of the universe. So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Bye bye,
Awesome.
everybody.
Great. Thanks, everyone.